We all have situations, experiences, and moments in our life when we know deep at our core we have to do something different. We have to pivot. And regardless of how big or small that pivot is, it requires us to change something in our life. And that change can feel really uncomfortable. However, it is that change that is creating something entirely new. And it is that newness that creates a very different way of life in one area or multiple areas of our life. What's this all about? It is all about reinventing thyself. My name is Michelle Shutter, and I'd like to welcome you to Reinventing Thyself. I am so glad that you joined me today because it is here that we'll move beyond our old self, our old identity, and that trailer of garbage from the past that we like to pull into the future, but really need to ditch that hitch. It is here that we'll move into that place of reinvention and embracing the newness of it all. Are you ready to step into reinventing thyself? Because guess what? It is never too late, and your time is now. Let's get started. Hey, it's Michelle Shutter. Welcome to Reinventing Thyself. I am really glad you are here today because I'm going to share with you 3 tips to start moving you in that direction of reinventing thyself, because it is all about embracing the newness and creating something in our life that is aligned with our heart and soul. And let's face it, that newness can feel uncomfortable because it requires us to pivot in some way. And now more than ever, it is so important that we start to embrace that and lean into that pivot, because it is never too late to reinvent yourself. It is never too late to start something new. So I hope your day is off to an amazing start. And we're going to just jump right in here with the 3 tips to reinventing thyself. Now, there's a lot more that I could have shared with you today, but we're going to just limit it to 3. Now, when you think of reinventing yourself, that can be something big. It could be something small. It could be something something small as like starting a new fitness routine or an exercise routine of some sort. Or it could be as big as like, I want to transfer or transition out of my career. I want to do something completely different. I want a job change. I want to become an entrepreneur. I want to start my own business. Like there's so many, there's quite a range of things that can happen when you are making that choice to reinvent yourself. But these 3 tips that I'm going to share with you today really are tips that you can use universally. Okay. It doesn't have to, they're not specific to your health. They're not specific to your career. They're not specific to, you could even use these in relationships. It is not specific to anything. And that's why these tips are so powerful for you today. So let's get started with tip number 1. Now, these are in no order. Okay. It's not in a hierarchy of any sort. But tip number 1 is all about inspired action. Now, when you make that decision that you want to reinvent yourself in some way, you are going to have a lot of baggage that likes to bubble to the surface and is bubbling to the surface because it's meant to be let go. Okay. It's not meant to create a brick wall for you. It's not meant to block you. It's not meant to stop you. It's all bubbling up because it is time for you to release it. Now, one of the things that you can do is making sure you're taking inspired action. Now, inspired action does not feel heavy. It is not about, I have to do this or I should do this. It shouldn't feel like a drag to do this. Like you should feel good about taking the inspired action, about the action. If it doesn't feel good, if it is not exciting, now keep in mind it could feel a little scary, right? Because it's something new. But if it's scary and yet it feels good, it feels exciting to move forward, that's a sign that it's inspired action. If it feels light to you, that's a sign that it's inspired action. if it feels heavy, as I mentioned, if it feels like a drag, if you're forcing yourself, if you just again, like it feels really heavy, you really have to question yourself if this action has any inspiration for you. Because if it doesn't, the results that you're going to get are going to be a direct match to that heaviness, to that drag. It's going to be like, see, this always happens to me. I knew I was going to get these results. I don't know why I even bothered, right? So you have to be really conscious of that action you're taking and whether it's coming from inspiration or sometimes like desperation or a place where it just doesn't feel good. And if it doesn't feel good, you really have to question yourself as to like, why am I even doing this? Like, what is the purpose? Where is the alignment in all this? Why doesn't it feel good? Perhaps there are things that are bubbling up that are potentially trying to block you in a sense. What are those things? What are those old patterns? What are those old pain points that are surfacing because they're ready to be released? Okay. So your first tip for today is make sure you are taking inspired action. It should feel good. And if it doesn't, don't force yourself into this. Like take some time and pause and look at what, like, again, like, why am I doing this? Why is this coming up? Why does this feel heavy? Don't be afraid to stay in that space. So many times we don't want to be in that space, and I'm kind of going down a little sidetrack here, but so many times we don't want to stay in that space because it feels uncomfortable. Like we should know what to do. We should be moving forward. Like all that past masculine, heavy, wounded energies, like is coming forward. And I'm going to talk about that more in tip number 2, but just keep in mind that that space of the not knowing is okay. It's okay. A lot can be revealed to you in that quiet space. And let me tell you, sometimes that space is a few hours. Sometimes that space is a few days. Sometimes it's weeks, months, and unfortunately, it can even go beyond a year, right? You don't want, obviously nobody wants that, but that space can be a tricky place to navigate. So again, tip number 1 is inspired action. Tip number 2 is all about staying balanced in your masculine and feminine energy. Now, energy is one of those topics that I just really love to talk about, and we'll talk more about this whether you're listening to this on podcast or catching the video. But regardless, you want to make sure that your energy is balanced. Now, when you're in a great place of feminine energy, now, when I describe energy in feminine and masculine terms, it is not gender specific. Every human being has masculine energy and every human being has feminine energy. At our core essence, there is a dominant energy, but for every human being, we have both energies. Now, when you're in your divine feminine energy, you know, like you're feeling confident, you're magnetic, you're empathetic, you're creative, you're trusting the process. And it's really this beautiful place of flow. Now, that place also, that feminine energy has to be balanced with masculine energy, because if we are just stuck in our feminine energy, like we don't get anything done, right? So we want to be in a balanced place. Now, masculine energy in that divine place is all about, you know, being focused, efficient, disciplined, accountable, very practical. And we really want to think about, you know, when in terms of energy, like how do we want to show up? And when we look at masculine and feminine energy, it's a dance between the two. We are not, if we stay in one energy 24/7, that is not good for us, right? We have to go between, again, dancing, flowing, whatever you want to call it, but you have to move between both energies. Now, here's what happens when you try to reinvent yourself, when you are making that decision to reinvent thyself. It is going to bring up, as I mentioned in that first tip, a whole lot of stuff. And a lot of times we come from a place of wounded feminine and wounded masculine energy. And when we are in that wounded state, we're coming from our ego. We're coming from a place of fear. We're coming from those old patterns, those old pain points. And if we are in our wounded feminine energy, here's what happens. We are sacrificing ourselves. We don't put any boundaries on things. We self-sabotage. We are looking for external validation, and it really doesn't serve us. Now, if your core essence is feminine, and I've just said one of these things and you're like, oh my gosh, that's so me. Like self-sabotage for females is a big one, right? And so you really want to be conscious of what kind of energy, like how do I want to show up? What am I bringing forth in this whole process of reinventing thyself? Now, from a place of wounded masculine, we are all about controlling. We have that need to be right. We have a big fear of failure. There, we go into that blame, shame game. There's a lot of judgment that happens. And even if your core essence is feminine, I guarantee you, you're probably seeing some points here. And this isn't all of it by any means. I'm just doing something really surface level here. But you're probably seeing some of those where you're like, oh yeah, uh-huh. And for many women, especially if you're mom and you perhaps will have a lot more responsibilities than, and you're maybe working outside the home or you have a business, we can go into that wounded masculine very easily because we think that control is the way that we're going to get our outcome. And that deep desire sometimes to be right does not serve us. And then we end up judging ourselves, judging others. So if I connect this to that first tip, how on earth can we take inspired action when we're coming from that place? It is so challenging to do that. Okay, so keep in mind that we have a divine feminine and divine masculine energy, which really aligns with our heart and soul. But when we're looking to make a change, unfortunately, the wounded feminine and the wounded masculine generally come up first. Now, again, it's really important to be super conscious as to what energy is showing up for you. So that is tip number 2, is to stay balanced in our energy. Now, I took some notes here because I want to make sure that there are a few things I didn't want to forget. So tip number 3 is really about limiting conforming conversations. Now, what do I mean by that, right? If you've made a decision that you want to reinvent yourself in some way, and you go out and just announce it to the world, I want you to be prepared for all the attacks, all the and silence, all the people whose opinion thinks it matters more than you. Okay, so if you announce something, here's what happens. All of their baggage starts to come up, and then it's like projected onto you. So in a sense, they are the ones that are fearful of your change. It is their issue. It is not your issue. But you have to be prepared for these conversations. Some people will also fall into cricket mode. Like you'll announce something, you'll share something, and it will be silent. They won't share anything. They won't even acknowledge you. The support is like non-existent. And you were kind of like, oh my gosh, like what the heck? Like this isn't what I was expecting. Right? So, and when we do that, when people express their opinions, when we get the silent treatment, that's when we fall like into that place of judgment. but essentially the judgment is just a projection from them. So it's really important for you to do is, perhaps before you even make that announcement, is make sure you have surrounded yourself with people that are going to support you through this. Because if you are not expecting this, if you're not expecting the opinions of people that you're supposed to conform, you're supposed to stay where you are, you're supposed to not make that change, you're supposed to stay in your comfort zone. If you are not prepared for that and you don't have people surrounding you that can support you through that, you are going to second guess absolutely everything you do in terms of reinventing thyself. And when you second guess, that's not in alignment with your heart and soul, with your higher self, right? So what I want you to realize is, again, like that projection that is coming onto you, or what people are projecting to you, it's really about them being afraid to take a risk. And in the last episode 1, I talked about, don't die wondering. Well, when you conform and when you don't embrace the newness and really align yourself with your heart and soul, guess what? That's where people die wondering, right? Or their idea dies wondering, or that creative hit that they had, which they were taking inspired action and their energy was balanced. And all of a sudden they had this conforming conversation with somebody, and that person just felt the need to give their opinion. It's like the air just depleted rapidly out of the balloon, right? Like it just sucked the life right out of you. So make sure that you have people that are support you, because here's the thing. When you are reinventing thyself, it's going to take courage. It's going to take bravery. It is going to push you or move you out of your comfort zone. You can't do it being the same person that you are. You're going to have to do something different. And I love this. I saw this morning about bravery, and bravery is really about all that is worth of having every experience in your life. And it comes from bravery. So if you want to fully experience things, you're going to have to tap into some courage. You're going to have to tap into that bravery, because that's where you are honoring your existence. And I love that, right? Like, let's honor our existence by being brave and surrounding ourselves with people that are not going to expect us to conform. Now, they don't even have to say anything. They can be silent about it. They can be crickets about it, but you definitely would be able to feel that energy from them. Okay. So those 3 tips, and guess what? I have a bonus for you as well. So far as tip number 1, make sure you're taking inspired action. Tip number 2, stay balanced in the masculine and feminine energy. And tip number 3, limit those conforming conversations. Now, the bonus tip I have is more for you if you are looking to reinvent yourself in terms of some kind of income. If you are looking to perhaps move out of a job and you want to start a business, become an entrepreneur in some way, I want you to remember this bonus tip in terms of keep service to others at the forefront of your mind. Even if it's just that one person you're going to make a difference for, keep that at the forefront of your mind, because there are so many times that people see a business idea or something, wanting to be an entrepreneur. And guess what? They're like, oh my gosh, I can, replace my income. I could make X number of dollars per month and blah, blah, blah. And they get so caught up in the income of it that in turn, it's almost creating a desperation from them, because they don't like the situation they're in. They don't like their financial status. They don't like their job or whatever it is. But it's like that, it comes from a place of desperation. And when you're in that place, you lose sight of truly serving people. So keep even if it's just one person, come from that heart of service and keep that person at the forefront of your mind. Like, how can you make their life better? What can you do to serve them? What would you do to support them, even if you made no money at all? And that's kind of a tricky thing, right? Because obviously everybody needs money to live a life, to buy food, shelter, have the lifestyle they want, right? But when you come from such a deep place, like of serving somebody, that it wouldn't matter if you made $1 or not, that's going to shift for you. So keep that in mind in terms of reinventing thyself. And again, just that question of what can you do to make their life better? Okay, that's a question. So quick recap. Here are the 3 tips to reinventing yourself. Tip number 1, take inspired action. Tip number 2, stay balanced in your masculine and feminine energy. Tip number 3, limit those conforming conversations. And a bonus tip is be sure that you're coming from a place of service. And even, well, it should be, right? That place of heart of service, that deep place of service from your heart, that it doesn't matter if you make money or not, but you are making somebody's life better. Because when you come from that place, the money comes, it flows. It just does, because it's in a higher energy level. It is in alignment with what you truly want. So that is it for today. Don't forget, I have 3 shortcuts for you when it comes to reinventing yourself. And you can grab that download, which is absolutely free, at www.reinventingthyself.com. And through that download, you actually are able to book a call, a 20-minute reinventing call. I have opened some space up on my calendar, so the details on how to access that will be with that download as well. So if that is something that interests you and you're looking to reinvent yourself in some way, and you want to move beyond all this stuff that is starting to perhaps bubble up, or perhaps you've been in the same place for a long time and you need to do a new pivot, or whatever the case is, that has my calendar has been opened up, and I have some spaces there for you as well. So my message for you today, again, is take these tips, be conscious of those tips, be aware of what you are doing, be aware of those patterns, those pain points, that old stuff that is bubbling to the surface that potentially could stop you in absolutely every one of these tips. So go ahead today and embrace the newness of reinventing thyself, because it is never too late. Lean into that pivot. It's all there waiting for you. Until next time, take care. Well, what are you waiting for? Whether you've pivoted and are unsure, or you're on the verge of pivoting, there is no better time than now for you to begin. Want to know why? Because if it wasn't the right time, the pivot wouldn't have shown up. And to get you started, I've got 3 shortcuts to reinventing thyself. Just head on over to www.reinventingthyself.com and you can download it there. And don't forget to message me with the shortcut that resonates with you the most. One last thing. I know you and I are not the only ones that have leaned into the pivot. Be sure to share this with others so they can be supported too. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for supporting me and sharing this message. Until next time.